Hello and welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join us today for our discussion on CMMC. I'm Gar Whaley. I'm the co-founder of Aligned Technology Solutions. With me, I have Justin Weeks. He's our Vice President of Cybersecurity and Compliance. And not on camera is Brittany Watson. She is our Marketing Manager, and she will be managing the webinar for us.
Good morning.
Today, we wanted to talk about the most common questions that Justin and I receive when we're talking to clients and prospects and colleagues and peers about CMMC. Justin and I are both RPs, and our company Aligned Technology Solutions is an RPO. A little bit of housekeeping as we go through. If you have questions, please feel free to add them to the chat window below, and at the end we'll answer as many as we can. We want to be respectful of your time, so we'll keep this to 30 minutes as advertised. So let's get started, jump right in. Britt, would you mind putting up that poll that we're interested in getting some feedback on? So how ready do you feel your organization is for CMMC? Give you a second to click on one of those buttons. We're getting a lot of feedback, different types of feedback on how ready people actually are. So Justin, as Brittany finishes that poll, let's jump right in. Before we get into some of the most popular questions, would you mind starting by just giving us a high level on what is CMMC?
Absolutely, Gar. So CMMC is the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. And what that is, it's a cybersecurity framework that has some technical and non-technical requirements called practices in CMMC parlance. It was created by the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense of Acquisition and Sustainment, and it was created as part of an agreement and contract with Carnegie Mellon University. It's really a continuation of an evolving set of laws and regulations, starting with FISMA in 2002. It's most recently recognizable in its current form since around 2013, and many of the people listening may know of DFARS 7012 is where it was really instituted. It's designed to protect from disclosure FCI and CUI, so Federal Contract Information and Controlled Unclassified Information, from disclosure to our adversaries.
So Justin, who does CMMC specifically apply to?
CMMC specifically applies to Department of Defense contractors who are going to be handling Federal Contract Information, FCI, and Controlled Unclassified Information, CUI.
So tell us a little bit more about what the difference is and what CUI and FCI is.
And definitely that is a clarification that is definitely needed. So Federal Contract Information, also called FCI, is data that is information that has been shared by the federal government to you and is either part of a contract or is given to you in the ability to assist in delivering a contract. So basically a product or service that you may be offering to the Department of Defense, and it's not intended for public release. More importantly, the information has not already been publicly shared with anyone, so DoD has not put it on its website, no other government organization has put it on its website, so it is private information about the contract that hasn't been publicly shared and that you are required to protect. CUI is Controlled Unclassified Information. And that is information that is controlled by or owned by the government, or it could be created by you on behalf for the government. That also requires safeguarding and other controls such as dissemination that is consistent with laws, regulations, and other government-wide policies that you may be subjected to. It is important to understand that CUI is not classified information. That is a separate classification that's used for information and documentation and other things.
Yeah, so I was on a call this morning, Justin. Someone called to ask a little bit about CMMC because they're just coming up to speed on it. He was 100% sure they had FCI, was not sure they had CUI, and in his comments to me, he was wondering, why does he have to go through this? Why was CMMC created in the first place?
Yeah, so why CMMC were created really comes down to a very important fact. The United States and the defense industrial base and everything in the United States and across the world is constantly being attacked. Because of this, the defense industrial base and other organizations supporting the mission of DoD have been subject to kind of a number of data loss events over the years. Some have been small and insignificant, and some have been very large, such as the OPM data breaches in 2014 and 2015. So our adversaries are stealing information, and they're not just stealing information about personnel records. They're stealing our innovations and solutions to hard problems. They're stealing national security information. And all of this really puts us at a disadvantage. So CMMC was really designed to protect that information that is shared with the defense industrial base. And that's why they're focusing on federal contractor information and controlled unclassified information, that FCI and CUI. Mm-hmm. Really the goals of CMMC, why we're doing it, is to safeguard that sensitive information and really protect the warfighters that are actually fighting our wars. It was also to dynamically enhance the cybersecurity of the DIB to meet evolving cybersecurity needs. And it was also for ensuring accountability of the DIB to make sure that they're doing it and minimizing the barriers to compliance that the DoD has been seeing. It is also designed to maintain the public trust to a high professional standard of the information that's being shared with the defense industrial base, and also to contribute towards a collaborative culture of cybersecurity amongst the DIB and between the DoD and the DIB.
Interesting. So you mentioned, I think some more specific questions that we get, and one you mentioned generally earlier is NIST 800-171, and a lot of folks ask me, and I think they ask you as well, like how does NIST 800-171 relate to CMMC?
So way back in roughly 2013, there was DFARS 252-204-7012, which was an interim rule by the DoD that stated that everybody had to implement NIST 800-171 within their environments to protect covered defense information. So really what CMMC Level 2 is NIST 800-171. There's practically no changes to it. It's just a way to assess to make sure that you're meeting the NIST 800-171 requirements. Now, CMMC Level 1 is a little bit different. That is specifically there. It's a kind of like a mini 800-171, if you will. That is also based in laws and regulations, and it's there to really give you best practices that you should be following anyway as a business. But essentially, CMMC is NIST 800-171, and it's just a way to assess against NIST 800-171. So they're very much related, and they're very much one and the same.
Got it. So what is the process for becoming certified?
So the process is actually really simple. First, you have to determine if it's necessary for your organization. There's no need to go out and get this if you don't have a necessity to actually have it. So find somebody really to do a pre-assessment of your organization to determine if you have any additional gaps in your environment, and then do a final pre-assessment. Then after you do all of that, you're going to want to find an organization called a C3PAO. And those will be the individuals who actually perform the assessment against your organization. And then at that point, you're going to get assessed. Now, it's important to say, what's that process include? It also includes another organization called an RPO, who will help you implement and get things ready for the C3PO.
All right, great. I have a question on that a little bit later, but one of the most pressing questions that we get, I think you'll agree, is, when do I need to be ready for CMMC?
The answer is since 2016, and now would be the direct answer. So to give you a little background on why I think that is, that in 2013, they passed DFARS 252-204-7000, which included requirements of DFARS 252-204-7012. And really that required you to be compliant with NIST 800-171. The DoD gave 3 years notice to the Defense Industrial Base. Like I said, in 2013, these were published. And in 2016, it became effective. Once it became in effect, contractors were saying that they were in fact following NIST 800-171 and that they were self-attesting to it. So the answer is now. Now, a lot of people are waiting for this new rule that comes into effect. Mm-hmm. Well, with the new rule, it's expected in June. There's no definitive date from DoD, just for clarity at this time, but it is expected in June that they are going to create another interim rule and start those assessments in official capacity.
So, a question we often get as well, the difference between CMMC 1.0 and 2.0. A lot of questions come up around, can we self-audit?
No, you cannot self audit yourself. Now, you should do a self-assessment to see if you're ready. And really, you should also maybe talk to an external service provider or contractor or partner to do that assessment for you. It's sometimes better to have an independent assessment just to make sure you're ready from a risk perspective. Also, there's too much conflict of interest to have you self-assess yourself. In the reality of the situation, DoD did let a majority of the DIB self-assess itself in 2013 to 2016, all the way up to 2022. And they found through their assessments through DIBGAC that the DIB was in fact not performing to the standards that they found acceptable. So this is why self-attestation and allowing your MSP to audit you is no longer allowed. It really comes down to conflict of interest.
Well, I'm just to make sure I'm clear. What about level 1? Can you self-audit for level 1?
So you can attest to CMMC assessment with level 1, and they are allowing that. And quite honestly, they're allowing that because those are best practices for businesses anyway. And most of you have insurance companies out there outside of just regular business insurance that require to have that bare minimum standard. So if you're not doing that anyway, you should probably be doing it. So they're not doing that. But with that said, they may allow an avenue for that to be done by an external assessor. And there may be some incentives associated with that. DoD has hinted at that, but there has been nothing official that has come out.
Got it. So you mentioned earlier, because we're an MSP as well, and that's really how we start our business. But I'm getting calls and people asking me, can I just have my MSP do the audit? And you spoke generally. I want to drill into that for a second. So I think what you said is no.
No, there's too much conflict of interest. And also, it's important to know not just your MSP that can't do it. You can't have implementers do it, no predecessors, or really anybody that can be perceived as a possible conflict of interest. Friends, former roommates, distant or close relatives, golfing partners, really anybody that you have an association with has to be disclosed. And really, they should not be participating in the assessment due to conflict of interest reasons.
Not to drill down too much into it, Justin, but you're making it sound like that's almost a best practice, but really it's a requirement, right?
It is a best practice and it is a requirement. So the Cyber AB will be enforcing that during the process, and they have been very clear that will be enforced. And it is also part of the code of ethics that everybody in the ecosystem has signed.
So I was just, like I said, I was on a call right before this with a DIB organization, and one of the things they asked is, what should I be doing now to prepare for CMMC? And of course, the first thing I suggested was what you suggested earlier, is that you should have a gap assessment. Whether we do the gap assessment or you hire one of our competitors, that's neither here nor there, but you should start with a gap assessment. So is there anything else other than a gap assessment that we generally advise that you should be doing right now to get ready for CMMC?
Before you even do an assessment of yourself or have that gap assessment performed against CMMC, you really need to gather all the contracts you have and all the documents that you've signed over the years for your contracts. And you're going to be looking for some key terms in them. I'm going to list them off. There's a few of them, but one of them is DFARS 7012, DFARS 7019, DFARS 7020, DFARS 7021, ITAR, and EAR. If you have those in your contract, you absolutely are likely going to need to be CMMC compliant at level 2, in fact. So definitely look at that, understand that if you have those things, you've already been attesting to the fact that you are protecting this information against NIST 800-171, and that is important to understand. Once you've reviewed that and see if you have any type of exposure and need for this, also understand that future contracts to be awarded by the DoD are also going to require the CMMC level 1 or CMMC level 2, or even perhaps CMMC level 3. And when you get to that point, determine if your business is going to go after those contracts. If you decide that you're going to keep those contracts, if you decide that you're going to go after future DoD business, at that point, get a third-party evaluation. Have somebody externally come in, assess you independently. And after you get that assessment back, determine if the cost of remediating everything that's going to be required for CMMC is even worth you staying in the defense industrial base and offering services to DoD. So if you have a $20,000 contract that you're working on, something really, really, really small, it may not be even worth your time and investment as an organization to continue providing those services. But if you have something super substantial to your organization, maybe 30 to 40% of its revenue through a combined amount of contracts, that's a business risk determination that you're going to have to make and determine if that's even capable of saying if you want to even stay in the business.
But saying that, our recommendation is the CMMC level 1 framework. Again, level 1 is just good best practices that all companies should follow, regardless if they're in the DIB or not, right?
Yeah, if you're not following CMMC level 1 today, you really should reconsider how your risk appetite. You may not appreciate how risky the actions you are taking are, but if you have a moderate or low risk profile as far as how you feel and appetite for that, you definitely should be implementing at least CMMC level 1 and a good portion of CMMC level 2. A lot of that is not only considered best practice today, it's likely to be considered best practice for all companies, even outside the DIB in the coming years, and is expected by some insurance companies to even be in place.
And that's what we recommend to our non-DIB clients from our MFP practice as well, right? That and the CIS framework.
That's correct. That and the CIS framework as well. NIST has done a great job, and CIS has done a great job as well, really letting businesses know how they need to protect their environment. So even if you have no CMMC requirements, look at CMMC, also look at CIS. Those are good options.
Got it. So earlier we've talked about assessments. You've mentioned RPO, and I mentioned RPO and RPs at the beginning. So, what is an RPO specifically?
So an RPO or a registered provider organization is a business, a regular U.S. company that has dedicated the resources to assist the defense industrial base in achieving CMMC compliance. They receive accreditation from the Cyber AB, and there are a bunch of individuals that work for them, and they're called registered practitioners. Now, registered practitioners that work for these RPOs, they receive training regarding CMMC from the Cyber AB. They go under a background check. They are U.S. persons, and they also have to sign a code of ethics that the rest of the ecosystem adheres to. One of those being, for example, the conflict of interest. Now, an RPO is, why do they have these people? Why are they receiving this training? Well, the purpose is to provide advice, consulting, recommendations, and perhaps even help you and assist you in implementing some of the practice requirements of the CMMC. It's very important to know that although an RPO is very much involved and can be involved in your kind of preparation for CMMC, they can even be involved in your assessment, sit there with you at the assessment table and help you work with the assessors, but they cannot perform the assessment for you. They don't have the proper credentials from the CMMC AB to do that. Only C3.
That goes back to what you mentioned earlier. The MFP, the RPO, the people helping you get ready cannot be part of they cannot perform the audit.
That's correct. So even if a C3PO, say that, hey, I don't want to go into RPO, I want to go to a C3PO to prepare me. Some C3POs are also becoming RPOs, and that's fine, but the same company cannot do the assessment for you no matter what happens. Too much of a conflict of interest. You're checking your own work. You can't check your own work. We've all typed an email and read it 12 times, and somehow a typo still gets through and somebody points it out to you. You just can't check your own work, especially in very complicated systems. Great.
So as we sort of graduate through the questions that we get asked, moving more from more general to more specific, this is one of the biggest that I get asked. I don't know if you would agree with that in terms of what you're answering, but folks frequently ask me, is there an easy button? Can I achieve CMMC and NIST 800-171 by purchasing some piece of software or some system?
If there is an easy button, please email me immediately and let me know what it is. The answer is no, but just because it's not easy doesn't mean it's overly hard. So if you engage the right professionals, the process will seem very easy to you, but there's a lot of moving parts in the background. Now, systems and software may be required, and there are things that you may have to purchase along the way, whether that's services or products or software or things of that nature, and there may be some business changes that you have to make internally regarding your processes and the way you handle things. In the end, really, it's about the carpenter and not the tools. So you may purchase a whole bunch of tools, but find the right carpenter to tell you what tools you need and also to help you design a system that meets CMMC compliance that isn't overly expensive and is right-sized for your business.
Got it. Got it. Even more granular level question that comes up on 80% of the conversations I have. Can I continue to use commercial Office 365 or Google Workspace and be CMMC compliant?
That is one of my favorite and also one of the hardest questions to answer, Gar. So the answer is maybe, and I'm going to explain why. So Microsoft has a big ecosystem of service offerings, as everybody knows, but they fall really into a commercial environment, Microsoft GCC, and Microsoft GCC High, and then a very specific DoD area that commercial businesses can't get, and it's specifically reserved for DoD. So what you're really left with is commercial Microsoft 365 GCC and Microsoft Office 365 GCC High. Now, you can absolutely achieve CMMC compliance in all three of those, despite popular misconceptions here. Unfortunately, though, a lot of CUI comes with ITAR and EAR restrictions, and the commercial environment is not appropriate for that. And the reason why is that any customer support that you may interact with may not actually be a US person on the phone. That can only be guaranteed in GCC High. Also, there are other things, for example, like data sovereignty. Everything in GCC High is located in the United States, and Microsoft has gone through great efforts to make sure that that data stays and is retained in the United States, and that only US persons will be ever able to touch that information. So yes, you can become CMMC compliant without it. It's a lot harder as well because some of the services introduced outside of the GCC High environment actually may not be able to be secured like GCC High. So if GCC High, for example, is missing something, you're likely going to have to disable that anyway in your commercial and GCC environment.
Right.
Microsoft just doesn't have those protections. So GCC High is the high watermark. It's really where you want to be from a risk perspective. It's what we recommend because it's the less risky approach. If a client would come to us and say, hey, I really want to go in commercial, we would have to have a discussion about that risk, but it's very, very risky. It's even risky for us to even attempt to help you do it. GCC and GCC High are really where you need to be. And then that's going to be a determination of what type of information that you're handling and what type of information you intend to handle in the future. One more thing to say on this, a lot of this comes down to why commercial may not be very useful is DFARS 252, 204, 7012, specifically sections E through G. Which require you to be, in the case of an incident, be able to provide that information to DoD for over 90 days and also give them some tools to access the environment correctly. And Microsoft is not contractually obligated in the commercial environment to do that for you. Microsoft will contractually, in their contract with you in GCC High, allow you to meet EF and G. And there has been changes recently where they're now saying that you can do that with GCC as well. But still, the recommendation is GCC High because if you get ITAR EAR data, you're not going to want to have to spend the money to move everything over again and redo all this. So.
Right. So even though our, generally suggested recommendation, risk-based, is to stay in GCC High for the least possible risk, what is a secure enclave and how might that help?
Yeah, so CMMC can be costly, and you may only have a handful of contracts. That may be a significant portion of your business, but you may only have a handful of contracts that are being used that have FCI or CUI in them. In that case, DoD has allowed an approach called a secure enclave. And what that means is you take a very small segment of your company and you implement all the security practices and all the practices in CMMC directly within that secure enclave and not throughout your whole company. So really it's a separate system from your normal company systems, completely segmented. And you may only move maybe 3 or 4 users at your organization. If you're a 100-user organization, for example, and you have 3 people that touch FCI and CUI, you would move them to that secure enclave. That really effectively reduces your costs in a lot of ways because it's a much smaller environment that you have to maintain. But essentially that is a secure enclave. It could be done at a company-wide level, or it can even be done on a contract basis as well.
Right. So interesting, going back to that call I had this morning, They don't have CUI, they have FCI. Only a few users touch FCI. They have 200 end users. Some of them are in the field and would never touch it, but they only have a small group of users and a limited number of defense contracts that they need to fulfill. So I actually recommended something to think about would be a secure enclave. Is that a good way to look at it?
It is a good way to look at it. And best thing to realize here, there's no right answer to this. It's really how you feel that you want to run and operate your business. It's something to consider though. Our clients have gone both ways. We have clients who said, hey, I want my whole company to be CMMC level 2. And we have others who said, hey, I want to do a secure enclave approach. I will say that although the secure enclave approach does seem appealing, and it is definitely in most instances more cost effective, there are some other operational efficiencies that you're going to catch along the way. For example, people having multiple accounts, one to their commercial account and one to their GCCI account.
Right.
And those are some things that you're going to have to operationally understand. There may be some hiccups there, or if not hiccups, a little bit of tension and more drag than you probably were expecting. So it's not a panacea, if you will. It's not, it does have its pros and cons. Every solution.
Understood. So we've got about 5 minutes left. A couple more real short questions, and Brittany's been shooting some of the audience questions over to me. So I'll hit you with these last two sort of short ones. Is a SIEM, SIEM, required?
So I'll be quick, like you said, Gara. So no, it's not required, but you're definitely going to have a hard time complying with some of the CMMC practices without a SIEM solution. There's other ways to do it, but it actually may be more costly to you as far as resource expenditure of time to be able to achieve some of the goals there. And also, it's really just the best practice on the market today. That centralized log aggregation and correlation that you achieve with a SIEM solution, just do it. It's worth it.
It goes back to our less risky approach.
That's correct, and less costly too.
Yeah. So how often do we need to be audited?
So you need to be audited every 3 years. There is a little bit of a bonus right now. If you do get audited kind of today and you're able to find somebody who's capable of doing that, there is a backlog, just so everybody knows. You actually will get your kind of CMMC certified status, if you will. And when the DoD finally kind of gets that interim rule in place, you will maintain that certification from 3 years from the date that the rule is put in place. So all this time up until the time they pass the rule, that's based upon the current information they said. Of course, that could change, but they've been saying that for a while now, and that's unlikely to change, in my opinion.
Great. So Brittany, this is interesting, Justin. Brittany just shared the poll results from us, and about 30% of the folks said they're taking a wait and see approach. What do you think about taking a wait and see approach?
Oh, that's a really good question. It's all about your risk tolerance. So before I get into my opinions on it, understand that you've been supposed to be doing this since around 2016. So you should look up a False Claims Act, also known as a Lincoln Law. And that was really to prevent government fraud. The government since 1987 has kind of been able to recover $62 billion worth of contracts under the False Claims Act and also other fines. Also, 71% of all False Claims Act actions were initiated by whistleblowers at the organization. More importantly, those whistleblowers are incentivized because they get 15 to 30%, depending upon circumstances, of the money that the government gets back from you in fines. There's also jail time associated and things like that. But beyond the legality, you won't be able to be awarded contracts that have FCI or CUI when the DoD rule goes into place. So you will be effectively removed from the marketplace. And also, there's really nothing to wait for. You're already required to do these things. The only thing that we're waiting on when people say they're waiting and seeing is they're waiting to see how they're going to be assessed. So you're required to do this. You just haven't been assessed on it yet. And it's really just putting the final rules in place and how this is going to be performed. And that's really the only thing we're waiting for. Now, to answer your question directly, Gar, I'm a moderately risk adverse person. So I kind of sit in the middle. That's what moderately risk adverse means. And I really believe it's riskier to wait than not to wait. Not only that, because everybody's going to be trying to get certified at the same time when you wait. There will be backlogs. There will be shortages of people. You actually may not be able to get certified in a timely manner. things to consider when you're making that risk determination. It is your risk determination to make, though. So don't feel pressured into it. Just understand that there are consequences sometimes, and the DoD has been very aggressive in this stance.
And the poll results actually are the same as my anecdotal results when I'm talking to people. There are so many people that are taking that wait and see approach, and I always advise against that. We have, we're almost out of time here. There's a number of questions that have come in. Brittany sort of summarized two, and with the final minute, I'll just throw them both at you, Justin, and take your best shot at answering them in 60 seconds or less. And one is, how do we demonstrate maturity? And the other one that a few folks asked is, what is the shared responsibility model?
So the good thing is that you're no longer required to demonstrate maturity. That's the Delta 20 from CMMC 1.0. We're in CMMC 2.0 right now, and DoD got a lot of pushback on those new requirements. So they pulled them back and said, hey, you know what? We're returning to everything you were supposed to do in 2016 anyway. So they really pushed it back on the DIB. But with that said, there is a certain level of maturity that your organization is going to require to be able to be successful in implementing the practices of CMMC. So you don't have to demonstrate it anymore. Just achieving the practices itself is a demonstration in maturity in some cases. As far as what a shared responsibility model is, usually a shared responsibility model applies to cloud security frameworks. It's a cloud security framework that kind of dictates security obligations of cloud service providers. Really what it is a listing of your obligations and the obligations of the cloud service provider. Now, it's important to understand that although they may give you this, shared responsibility model, your obligations are your obligations, and you really are obligated to perform all of them. The cloud service providers just provide this to let you know what services that they're contractually bound to provide you. And that's a big thing to understand. If they fall down for some reason, it's still your obligation. It's not their obligation.
Okay, thanks, Justin. Folks, sorry we went 2 minutes over. So we're sorry about that. Justin, thanks so much for sharing your knowledge with all of us. This was a ton of information and we're grateful. And to our attendees, thanks for taking 32 minutes to join us today. I hope you found it as valuable as I did. We're going to shoot out the recording of this webinar as soon as Brittany has it up on YouTube. If Justin or I or Align Technology Solutions can be of any help to you in your cybersecurity journey, just please feel free to reach out. Thanks again and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.